Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Thursday, all of our guests today brought to you by Delaney's, OK Tire in Langley and Aldergrove. BC Lions hosting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Saturday, 4 o'clock start at BC Place, or rematch of last week when the Bombers beat the Lions rather convincingly. Here to talk about that and more from TSN, as always on a Thursday, Farhan Lalji. How are you, sir?
Oh, Donald, Rick, things
Wow.
are good. How are you guys? You like the shirt? It's not Friday, but
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it works.
Wow.
Absolutely. It's from the Rick Dollywall collection, I think.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, the Rick Dollywall collection would come with a glass of Crown.
Yeah. Well, where's that?
More than one. More than one.
Yeah. No, I'm much more conservative than Rick.
Yeah, probably not a good idea right now.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's a little early.
Hey, Farhan, going into Saturday's game, what can you tell us about Nathan Rourke's status? Injured against the Bombers last week.
I'd be surprised if he plays, but no one has told me that he won't. Just the fact that he hasn't practiced the first 2 days of the week, I do believe the Lions are going to take this right down to the end. I don't think we're going to get a decision until Saturday. But, at some point, he's got to progress as the week goes here. We don't know what he's been doing on the side. I do know he's been doing a lot of movement and, some other things to test himself, but has he been throwing? And the way Nathan throws, there's kind of traditional quarterback mechanics, and then there are rotary quarterback mechanics. And when you're a rotary thrower, you put a lot less strain on your arm, but you put more strain on your obliques and, your core area, because you're coming hard and you're decelerating and you're coming to a sudden stop, right? And, he talked about how he planted his left leg and couldn't get his body through. So I think that, we want to see that this guy can not only throw, but throw it down the field and throw it with velocity. So unless they're convinced, it doesn't make sense. This is also an injury, sometimes with a lower body injury, right? It's pain management. This is an injury that can get worse if you don't deal with it correctly. So my guess is they'll take a conservative approach and that he probably dresses as the number 3. But again, we don't know that for sure and won't know that until Saturday.
Well, Canuck fans know all about this, or Vancouver sports fans know all about the oblique with the Pedersen and Hughes situation last year, seemingly endless. Farhan, so if this happens, if Rourke is indeed number 3, what should we expect at the quarterback position? I would assume the veteran Jeremiah Masoli would take over.
Yeah, Masoli's been getting the majority of first-team reps the first 2 days of the practice week, and I'm going to be heading there later today. Practice is about to start, so we'll see what happens today, but I would expect it to be the same. And, I think you're going to get a guy that's got a lot of veteran savvy and understands the pictures that are put in front of him by Winnipeg's defense. And you get these situations with Winnipeg where they don't necessarily bring a lot of pressure. They drop a lot of guys into coverage, and it forces you to make good decisions, and it forces you to be patient. And I do think Jeremiah is capable of doing that. So, look, I'm not going to say BC is better with Jeremiah Masoli than they are with Nathan Rourke, but this guy's won many football games in his career in the CFL. So if they can play great defense and have an improved running game and take advantage of the fact that they now have a week of film of Winnipeg, that should make things a little bit better from a coaching perspective. So they got a chance, but they'd have a better chance with number 12 under center for sure.
Stanley Cup champs, the Florida Panthers, back-to-back years. I look at the Canucks, and I thought the other night, how far are they away from Florida? They got a lot of work to do, a lot of work.
They do, because one of the things in this league, what wins in this league is high-end skill. And Florida is able to match high-end skill with an extremely deep roster, talent across the board. I mean, we're seeing more and more, right? Back in the day, you played a top 6 and your third line was your energy line and, your fourth line. Now it's like you got to play with the top 9, and Florida has that. And you look at how they were able to mismatch Edmonton, and that was especially in the middle 6, right? Especially when Edmonton loaded up. Florida had an answer for those top 2 guys, right? With Barkov and Reinhart, and then they were able to really dominate him in the middle 6, especially with that third line highlighted by Brad Marchand. So And you look at their defense and how they've extracted value there, and players have been so much better. A guy like Seth Jones, who looked like his career was dead and buried in Chicago, all of a sudden comes out and looks like a top four defenseman again. There's so much there that even Bobrovsky, who's a big time money goaltender, wasn't really asked to do much, right? So Florida could play you any way you wanted to play, and it shows you. Like, if the Lions are that far away if the Canucks are that far away from Edmonton, they are miles away from Florida.
Matt Duchene's off the market today, and that's a guy the Canucks were really going to look at on July 1st. I don't know how they're going to get a top six forward right now. I'm hearing they're having a tough time. There's too many buyers and not enough sellers. It's a real hard market right now to get top six help.
And everybody seems to want ready-made
The
help
same
in
things.
return, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to sit there and sell for prospects.
Yeah.
So even if you look at San Jose and Chicago and teams like that, like, they're not ready to be bad forever, right? Like, they kind of feel like they've dealt with a certain level of pain for 3 years, and they want to take the next step forward as well, if you think the easy answers are there, right? So it is going to be difficult, right? So Jim Rutherford has said that he's more likely to improve the team with the trade rather than he is, by free agency. But I don't know where that's going to come from, because you also have the cap going up. So everybody believes that they can now spend.
Yep.
And it's going to put the Canucks in a real precarious position. And it's why we're hearing less and less about Pettersson on the market, right? That maybe they're not going to go down that road, because their best chance might be to get this done here. And maybe I'm reaching, but they're probably going to be in a position where they've got to try to improve internally, whether it's a Max Sasson or somebody from Abbotsford, guys that are doing so well right now that, Linus Karlsson or whoever, that they might just say, look, we need you to take another step. And that's not going to be what fans want to hear, but that might be the only options, because when Rutherford says we need 3 more guys, boy, I sure hope he can get 1, because I don't think he's going to get 3.
Okay, I know you have Abbotsford Canucks fever. You listed off some players there.
Or green.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Not the right shade, but close enough. I know you've got Abbotsford Canucks player. Which player, and again, you listed them off there, some is most likely to be able to help the Canucks next season? I know Rick's a big Sammy Blais fan.
Yeah, get him on.
Yeah, and when you look at what the Canucks could ice, right? Like, their bottom 6 could be good next year, right? Because they've got some pieces. Are they willing to take some of those pieces and put them in elevated role? Sammy Blais is going to be a bottom 6 or a fourth line player, regardless of how you slice it. And he had some success in that series long ago against the Canucks, and maybe there's something there. But is there more there than even an Archie Baines, let's say, right? Who's had a couple of middling opportunities when he's been up with the big club, but could he be a better answer in their bottom 6? And there are some guys there, but I mentioned the 2 guys at center in Karlsson and Sasson, but even a guy like Danila Klimovich, right, who's had very little cups of coffee here. I've only been to a couple of games this year, but all of a sudden he's noticeable, even when he's not scoring, right? He's not necessarily there shift after shift, but are there some players there? Because ultimately this team needs to find a way to generate some offense. I think when you look at that lineup, you don't necessarily see a ton of big time scores. They're going to need something out of Jonathan Lekramacky, who can't even get into that lineup, in large doses. So, I'm not sure, to be quite honest, who's the obvious one, but there are some guys that I think have raised the eyebrows of the organization, right? I mean, Rutherford and Alvin are always there. They're getting a first-hand look, and we know there's a big gap between the 2 leagues, but I think there are a couple that they're just going to have to give some opportunities to and see what's there. Achu Ratu, right? I liked what I saw at times this year. Is he ready for a bigger sample size and a bigger role in a middle 9, right? Or in a top 9 or a middle 6? Let's see.
Yeah, at least we can ask that question about Abbotsford and not get laughed at, or maybe you are laughing. I'm not sure.
No, truly, I'm not. But again, like, there aren't any top line guys there, right? In terms of next year, but there could be some middle 6 solutions there, or at least guys are going to be forced to look at, and maybe with a bigger role. I mean, we often wonder what happens when you take a scorer or a top line player and you bring him up and you put him in a fourth line role, right? That's not always the best opportunity to succeed. If they get a little more runway because the club has no choice but to give it to them, some of them might surprise us.
Outstanding, Farhan. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, boys. Have a good weekend.
You bet.